All right, Stefana, thank you. Thank you for joining the podcast. You are currently the Senior VP of Infrastructure and Operations at OwnBackup, which provides a SaaS data protection platform in the cloud. And I
Yes.
would like to talk to you about this role a bit further down the line, but I am really interested in how you got into tech to begin with. You were at CA Technologies when you started, 16 and a half years there. So what was it like finding that role and getting into it and going through 16 years of being at CA Technologies?
Well, it's interesting because I never thought that I would take the path I took. And I think that's a lot of people, right? A lot of people get into tech in various ways. I will say that I started at CA Technologies while in college. I was a supervisor of the call center, and it was a technical call center, but really mostly customer service. And I was taking technical courses on the side, our CompTIA certifications, if you remember those. They still exist, the A+ certification. I was really trying to get more in the technical track while my career path was going down like a journalism, communications path in college. So it's a very odd way to get into tech. But interestingly enough, after a year at CA Technologies, I realized I was the most quote unquote technical person in my department, and I became their fix-it person. I became their troubleshooter. That led me into a role of taking on technical support and then moving on into product management. I don't think I knew anything about product management when I started my career journey. And it was almost stepping into a place that was like, wow, this is exactly what I like to do. And it's all in one bucket, in one role. So I did land in product management. And while I was at CA Technologies, I managed a bunch of different products. A lot of the work that I did was acquiring new companies, startups, working with them, helping them advance, but then acquiring them and then turning them into profitable companies within the organization of CA. So that's why I spent a lot of time there in my career. I spent a lot of time there learning about products that help developers, that help software engineers, that help operations teams, acquiring those technologies and then turning those products into something that can integrate with the rest of the product portfolio and can really expand the reach of CA Technologies.
Very interesting. So this acquisition and then turning business into profitable businesses as part of the acquisition, that's something you had to learn on the job, or how did that come about?
Yes. Everything had to be learned on the job. I knew nothing about software engineering. I didn't know how to code when I started. I didn't know what a data center looked like. A lot of, if not almost everything that I've learned was on the job. Yes, of course, I've got the base skill set from college, and I've got the base understanding of how to work and the work ethic from my parents. But I will say that a lot of my work was learned through growing through my company and interacting with founders, interacting with different software stacks. I guess you'd say I stepped into operations because of that, because I ended up being a product manager for operations tools, for operations products, for data center tools, back when we actually managed our own data centers, right? And I think that's where I learned this stuff. I learned how to coach founders, because I saw how after one or two of these companies being acquired, I saw what went well and what didn't. When it came to not just funding rounds. I guess I didn't spend a lot of time in funding rounds because I was the final round. I was the acquisition round at that time, but more around the fact that how they structure their organizations for success. What tools do they use to help accelerate their growth? And I'm talking about technology tools, not just, how they do their finances. So I was spending a lot of time on their technical support teams and their code and how they were managing that code, making sure that it could be reviewed by others, making sure that they have policies and procedures in place that will scale once they get acquired. So really helping them get to the point of scale for growth.
Gotcha. And if I were just to unpack that a little bit, what did a good company look like that integrated well, and what did a bad company look like that was difficult or took a longer time?
I will say that I don't like the fact that there's companies out there that just acquire technology and assume
Mm.
that that's going to work, right?
Mm.
Because who built it? People. People always built the technology. I know you're going to probably ask me about AI in this podcast today, but I will tell you that the people matter.
Mhm.
And that is one of the biggest things I learned during acquisition is how do I bring the people along this
Mm.
acquisition? When I'm acquiring the technology, if I don't bring the competence of the people, the distinctive competence they have, the thing that they built, along with their brains and their motivation, I won't be successful. So it's not just turning a profit. It's not just selling
Mm.
software or widgets, right? It was really about how do I get these developers really wanting to work at this new big company and wanting to see this product succeed. So that's how I ended up in more higher level management at CA Technologies in product, really helping keep engineering teams together for success in
Gotcha.
the
And you
future. Yeah.
understood. So your promotions within the company came about directly from the results that you were delivering. There was no other formula that you have found other than.
Yeah, I think, it's not just a formula. I don't have like a silver bullet for this, right? I think there's a few things that I did that, I had setbacks in my career. Everybody has them, but I found ways to make every single step a step forward in a trajectory. And I will tell you this, everyone always asks you, what do you want to do? What do you want to
Mm.
be? I never knew what I wanted to be or what I wanted to do. I just knew what types of work I liked and what types of people I liked to collaborate with and what excited me about work. And then I just drove on that fact. I knew exactly what made me feel productive, made me feel successful. And I kept driving on that. So, what is the silver bullet? I guess the answer is make sure you make friends and influence people, if we're going to
Mm.
quote Dale Carnegie, right? But at the same time, also, don't forget the people you're working with and the people who work for you. So, one of my biggest learnings, I think, over even in the last 5 to 6 years, is that the people that I work with and the people I hire are the people who are going to make me successful. And I know that people call this a servant leader type of viewpoint where I serve
Mm.
them. I believe in that. I've been practicing that, and that has helped me succeed significantly over the past few years. So as you get into leadership, I think the answer in technology leadership, it's not just focusing on the best technology that goes out
Mm.
there, but also looking at the broader view of the people that work for you and how they'll be successful, how you can tie that to the overarching goals of a company. It's pushing on that while not being too lofty with your goals. You can't just say, "Hey, engineer, you're responsible for achieving a $300,000 revenue growth this quarter." Engineers don't resonate with that, right? You have to find ways that the work that they are doing hits that bottom line that helps the company grow. And I think that's the business arm of me plus the technology arm of me has helped me find my niche. And I think everyone has a niche like that. They have their technology side and that other skill they bring to the table.
Gotcha. Yeah, I do have being in the consulting business, I have seen a lot of great soft skills which have helped people greatly in their careers. This business acumen that you have developed, is that innate? Does that come from your family? Like, where's?
So that's a good question. My parents are immigrants. They come from Italy. I always say from Sicily, but they come from Italy. Not that they grew up in the United States after immigrating, but they ran a business. So they ran a restaurant. Um, it is a pizzeria. Yes, that's what a typical Italian family runs in New York, if you were wondering. So I would say that they didn't have a business acumen, but they had a work ethic, right? And that's what I learned from my family. Where I learned my business acumen was just a few courses on HR law and such, but I learned from the people around me and specific people throughout my career, how they made me feel. when they were saying certain things and why they said certain things. I had one boss who said, listen to what they say and how they say it. And she was a really big influence on me, because at the time when I was reporting to her, it wasn't going well. I felt oppressed. I felt like she was kind of really nitpicking, and I felt that she was pressuring me in a direction and trying to get me out of the technical realm. But the advice she was giving me was something that I was able to look back on and go, oh, that's what she was meaning. It was, Stefana, when you say something, the way you say it matters more than what you say in some cases. So I think that really helped me learn this business acumen, helped me understand how to work with others, listening and learning every day. I think that's also one of the things that make me want to continue in a job. If I'm learning something, if I'm learning, I'm happy.
Very cool. So you mentioned that in your on your LinkedIn profile that while you were at CA Technologies, one of the many accomplishments that you had was to have a first to market cloud platform. Could you unpack that a little bit for us, like what that meant at that time, and what are the
Yeah.
operational hurdles that came with it?
So I would say that, do you know Amazon right now? You know, AWS? Before that existed, before it existed as a cloud provider, there were many telcos that were going out and trying to be data centers for large companies. And they're kind of building this cloud-like thing. We used to call them mesh networks. We used to call them, you know, grids, where they were sharing resources, you know, technology resources or your hardware resources, compiling them together in some sort of software stack so that you can consume them. I would call the modern day Kubernetes, right? Or rather the old timey Kubernetes. And now modern day, we are using things like Kubernetes. We're using the full cloud environment. So back years ago, when I first started in this space, we were looking at an acquisition, and the company was called 3Terra. And 3Terra was coming out with a grid technology, a technology to grab compute resources and pull them all together so that you can drag and drop applications into your cloud. We didn't actually call it cloud, right? We didn't actually call it cloud. So it was like the EC2 before the EC2, okay? And it was a really cool technology. And many of the telcos out there at the time, and I'll just call out a few, like Savis or CenturyTel, or, you know, Roadrunner Cable, which was it was acquired by AOL at one point. And I know I'm dating myself now when I talk about these companies, but basically all of these companies were looking for a platform to run the data center on, so that they didn't have to rack and stack new servers every day, and they can actually buy and use it. I guess you could call it back then a multi-tenant environment for the hardware being used. Back then we were using single tenant hardware, right? So a data center company would come in and they would say, hey, Savis, I want, you know, 12 servers. Cool, here's your 12 servers. We don't do that anymore, right? We say, I have an application, it needs this many resources. Give me the resources, I don't care what's underneath it, right? And that was the transition we were making with this technology. It was very cool, I would say. And that kind of spirit that launched me into the infrastructure space. Whereas prior to that, I was more in the engineering tools, the CI/CD tools, and so on.
Gotcha. And those tools. So my journey was a bit different. I didn't get into IT until perhaps 14 years after being in electrical engineering for a while. So my first foray into IT, I didn't know what a data center was either. This is only like 6 years ago, 7 years ago, perhaps. So it was pretty interesting. So I missed out on some of this early, all the work that you have done and your teams have done into getting everything ready and getting everything polished. So it's much easier for folks like me to get into this technology now, because a lot of that has been worked out. I'm curious to know that after being at CA Technology for 16 and a half years, what prompted you to go and get into, I think Opsani was next after that. And that was an AIOps company pretty much,
Yeah.
correct?
So, you know, when you acquire a lot of companies, you meet a lot of founders. So I'll start with that. Peter Nikolov is one of the founders of 3Terra, and then he was looking into a new area of infrastructure. And I was talking to him, and I was kind of at a point at CA Technologies where I said, I really need to go to another company. 16 and a half years is a very long time at a company. And, again, I know you said you've been in the industry for 6 or so years, but the industry 20 plus years ago was that you stayed where you started, right? People would work at IBM from start to finish in their career, and that was normal. And that was actually coveted. People wanted that, right? So I come from that traditional background. And then I said, all these new people are coming in with all this experience. All these founders I'm talking to have all this experience that I can never get at this big company. So the transition was a big one, but it was really the right time in my career, both professionally and personally. Personally, my children were coming out of daycare. They were going into school. I had a big transition. I also had the situation where I wanted to go back and travel again. So I had taken a little hiatus from traveling heavily. And I also was really intertwined with a lot of startups at the time. So that was the trigger. And I saw what Peter was doing. He was looking at both AI, by the way, that I had a background in because I had done a project or two with using machine learning algorithms in my last at CA Technologies. We could talk about that too. But yeah, we could definitely talk about that. I see your face. But then when he talked about how he was really applying it to infrastructure and how we would use Docker images to really, decide where and how big a service would run automatically on the fly, we would save tons of money for these data center providers or, people actually using now AWS and Azure and GCP. So that was where he was headed. And I trust Peter. He's definitely he's a serial entrepreneur, someone that I follow often, and someone who brings me along this amazing journey. So it was a great step forward into my career. But do you want to talk about the AI stuff?
Yeah, I'm very interested. Back in CA, you were already doing this. Okay,
Yes.
so what was going on then?
So, it's funny. I talk about this all the time because everyone in my family, my friend group who's not really in tech says, what are you going to do about the AI? And I say, this stuff has been around forever, everyone. We've been using this forever. And it's nothing new. It's nothing new. But obviously there's a lot of new iterations. It's been consumerized recently. So, with ChatGPT and so on and so forth. My husband is a very avid user, especially when responding to me. He uses the app to know how to respond to me. Anyway, going back to my work at CA, back when I was working on a technology called ITKO at the time, Lisa. If you Google it, you'll find them. You'll find a lot of actually funny YouTube videos of me singing the Lisa song. So please don't Google that. Maybe I shouldn't have said that on the podcast. But Lisa was a technology that was focused on stubbing and mocking. It was smart stubbing and mocking for engineers. It was out there to help you shift left in the cycle of DevOps, right? So DevOps was the space. We were really trying to build that space. It was right at the beginning when DevOps started being coined as a term. So what was going on is we were trying to take the test cases that people would do in pre-prod and pull them all the way back into dev. But in dev, you did not have, an environment. You didn't have all the integration. You didn't have all the different points of the application there to do the full testing. So what should you do? Well, Lisa was a technology that helped you stub and mock. So truly mock out real services. The cool way we applied AI, now get this. We took an algorithm for genome sequencing from an Australian university, okay? Swinburne University. And we took that algorithm and we applied it to the responding to calls. So if you send a call or a request, like it through the API, a request and a response would come back, we would train the algorithm on the request response so that any request going in, the algorithm would know how to respond. So now, I know I'm getting deep now, but basically the AI, okay, the machine learning knew exactly how to respond to any input smartly. And that turned testing on its head, right? That allowed developers not to have test data. They can just send in data and they knew the response would come back correctly from the AI, or as close as possible in the 99.9% range. And that
Whoa.
was a big eye-opening experience for me, because I was taking genome sequencing algorithms and applying that to request response pairs. I never thought it would be the case. Yes.
So we're still like mocking this stuff currently manually most of the case. Like, what happened to this technology? Is it shelved somewhere in Pentagon or
there.
something? Or
It's available. I feel like I'm selling it now. I mean, the technology still exists.
Okay.
There's test data management companies that use it to generate data. It definitely exists today. And there's a ton of articles that were written by the university students I worked with about how this algorithm was trained for, and I'm going to go a little old on you here, for mainframe request response pairs. And that's a big area because not many people know what those requests and responses should be formed as. Or message queues, so RabbitMQ.
Yep. Yeah.
So this is a, it wasn't just, the basics. It was more advanced request response pairs. So yeah, maybe after this recording, we'll talk a little further and I'll show you the software running.
That's pretty amazing. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
shocked. Never even heard of this for some reason. And so you at Opsani, you were a chief evangelist and VP of business development. What is a chief evangelist, if I may ask?
So
Maybe it's a
I
silly
swept
question.
the floors. I did the HR paperwork. We were a 7-person startup, and I was employee
Okay.
number 5. So
Okay.
I am laughing at sweeping the floors because I actually did at one point sweep the floors, but it was not intentionally because I was the only female, by the way. Promise you that my team was laughing when I did it. What are you doing, Stefana? So when I joined Opsani, we were really pre-market, right? We were trying to figure out, we were more bootstrapped than seed funding, and we were trying to get towards the seed funding round, and we really wanted to see a product market fit. So I was there to start talking to my contacts. I did business development, which is so unlike me. If anyone knew me, they'd go, Stefana, you hate selling. And I do. I hate selling. I do. So, I mean, basically, I was there not to sell, but to try to get feedback from a variety of resources, including developers, including operations folks, from data center operations directly, from the customer end. We were trying to figure out where our market was, what was our total market opportunity, and who was our user when we were looking at this technology. Because the industry, again, at the time did not have a big uptick in companies trying to optimize cloud for cost and scale. They were just doing it for cost. And we were saying, well, not everyone cares just about the cost number. They actually want their stuff to scale automatically. They want to predict scale needs. So who would want to make that purchase? Who is our buyer? Who is the customer of this software? So that's my job. My job was to figure out who the customer was, to talk to a ton of engineers, to go to development conferences and give demos live while they failed, and show them Kubernetes running and show them how to build Docker containers very quickly. So I did a lot of work like a developer evangelist, and it was a fun job, a fun opportunity in a market that was still not created, still not formed.
Gotcha.
So it was early stage.
Gotcha. And how did raising money here, millions of dollars in funding, differ from your past experience? Anything that you can talk about here?
Okay, so my past experience, the $1 million already existed, right? This new experience, and I had to fight for it amongst others, and say, this is why we should have invested in this instead of that. So the money was there to be spent, but I had to argue why to spend it on one company or another. Now in this startup space where I was bootstrapped, I was working for stock. No one had a salary. You're at that point and it was a good time because I was, hustling, I guess you could say. I also had to make more connections with VCs. I had to understand how they thought of business. And again, I have no finance background. I only learned it from the big company side. So I had to learn what they were looking at when they were investing in a company and how to write a pitch deck based on that. I helped my CEO pull that together and show the product market fit. It was eye-opening because I used to advise people in doing this work, and now I was doing it myself, and I saw how hard it was. I will say, I saw how difficult it was to shift my brain into from the advising side of things and saying, oh, it's simple, here's the things you do, to now do it, Stefana. And that was a big shift.
Okay, so 16 and a half years as CA, then Opsani, and that was you're working for stock, not having a salary. What what was going through your mind? Like, I can do this, no problem. Or were there also people who were saying, maybe Stefana, this is not a good idea. You have a steady job. Why do this? Why take the leap?
I think everyone I spoke to knew I was destined to not be at the big company too long. Like I was already there 16 years. So I don't think I had discouragement. I only had encouragement, including my leadership at the time. So they were they were like, wow, we're sad to have you leave, but we're really excited about what you do next. And that was supportive, I would say, very supportive of where I was headed. And I'm not trying to paint a pretty picture. I would say that I still keep in touch with a lot of these folks. And CA was like a family. So it was like really sad to leave. At the same time, I knew my career was destined for more, and I would not learn that in the big company setting. So when I moved over to Opsani, this really tiny startup, I knew it would be really shocking for me. And I said, let's give it 2 years. And I kind of set myself a deadline. One, from a financial perspective, because I wasn't a multimillionaire, right? Like my co-founders were. But from a perspective of what can I get out of this experience and how can I contribute to this company in 2 years to make them successful? And I think in the end, basically, they were acquired by Cisco years later. So it was a successful exit. And they did build some pretty cool technology. But at one point I realized, okay, it's now I've got to the point where we found product market fit. They don't really need a product manager yet. They really need somebody to sell, and that isn't my distinctive competence. That's not where I fit best. So I decided to take another leap into a different business, but more on the infrastructure side again, because I really realized that was my niche, working for Second Watch as a senior product manager. I was one of their first product managers at the time. They didn't know how product management worked, and they were trying to build their services business into a product business, build services like products. And that was a really cool experience as well.
Yeah. So what is a product manager? I'm not too familiar with it.
Good question.
And how does that, so there's probably, I guess in my head, project management and product management, like where is it similar? Is it different? Is it completely? Yeah.
So I can define that, but I also can define product management. So let's start with the definition, or what I think product management is. And there's a lot of people who can define it. But basically, I look at it as this: the product manager is the CEO of the product. Everyone has said that before, but what does that mean? They're the hub in the hub and spoke model, right? They're the center. They make the decisions on the requirements and the prioritization of those requirements. And they make sure that that's connected with the customer, with the developers, with the marketing team, with the sales team, with everyone in the company to make the product successful. They're very focused on their product or product line, how that helps the company grow. That's a product manager. Now, how does that differ from project management? Well, a project is very much, there's a start and there's an end. product management never ends. So if you like things that end and you have a big checkbox at the end and you're really successful, that's a project manager. If you are not happy when things never end, you're not going to do well in product management because it never ends. It's always continuous improvement. Your product never ends unless it's end of service and you're starting something new. I feel like a product manager is building, people call it the product, their baby, right? They build it from the ground up and they cultivate it and they integrate with other things and they make sure the customer is happy. They very much think like a customer mindset all day and every day. But let me put the big but out there. One thing that's really important about product management and software is you need to align really closely with your software development teams. And you need to be on the same page with them. Because if you're not, then you're misaligned. You're setting the priorities and they're building the software. The what and the why that you've defined about this product, what is it and why are we building it, doesn't actually result in the better how, which is what the developers build. Does that make sense? Do you want me to go through that a little bit more?
No, that makes sense to me.
Okay.
And while at Second Watch, you were focused more on DevOps side. So this is like DevOps in full swing, etc. And Second Watch is a managed services company, and it does professional services consulting as well. In the regard to multi-cloud environments, what is your advice to executives who may be using multi-cloud technologies or multiple vendors, or those focusing on one? Do you recommend multi-cloud as a strategy, or like what is your take on it, your opinions on this topic?
So there are times in my career that I've recommended one or the other, and I will say that there were times where I said multi-cloud can never happen. It's too complex, but nowadays, if you were to look at it, I have run multiple companies in a multi-cloud environment. One environment that I've worked in where all compute was in one cloud, AWS at the time for my environment, and all compute was there. But then I had all of my data lake in another cloud in Google. And that was really helpful for many reasons. One, we were playing on the strengths of the cloud service providers, right? We knew compute was doing really well over in AWS. They had the best cost compares. They had the best uptime and service levels. At the same time, Google was doing amazing things with data, and AWS wasn't caught up to that same standard. So it worked. There was a lot of work transferring data from one cloud to another, a lot of cost involved there. So I'm not sure that model still works today. It did work a few years back, but today I don't know if I would put that same model in place. Where I am today at OwnBackup, we are running 2 major clouds for our SaaS service. And we chose that for a few reasons. One is that our customers want to run their backups and house their backup data in the cloud of their choice. So it's a big need from a customer perspective. You can't have, for example, certain customers putting their data on AWS if they compete with Amazon, or vice versa on Azure. So Azure is my other cloud today. Why is this working today? Well, I have a standardized architecture. So the standardized architecture, a cross-architecture deployment that allows me to kind of hold my platform up at the top and deploy different backups to different cloud service providers. That gives me the ability to go where the best cost model is. I will be very honest, cost is a big thing when you're dealing with petabytes of data each day. It allows me to choose the right model for the company and choose the right vendor for the company. It also allows me to do what the customer needs and put the data where the customer wants it. But if the customer doesn't choose, I then have a choice based on cost. So there's two reasons for that. I think Cloud service providers have gotten to a point of they're very large. There's, three
Hmm.
major players, maybe even just two based on the market dynamics right now, right? I think the only way you as a SaaS provider, especially a SaaS provider that's consuming, many hundreds of petabytes of data, you need to have a competitive environment to be in to be able to choose where that data goes.
Interesting. And you've also built teams, DevOps teams specifically at Second Watch. And speaking of operations, with multi-cloud environments, where do you see currently, like what kind of knowledge or training do they need to be successful here? Or do they learn on the job? Like what have you seen in building these teams that has been
Yeah,
successful?
I would say that, it's difficult to say that DevOps could be a job you get right out of school. And
Mm,
I know that seems really like hypocritical for somebody like me who learned on the job. And the reason why I think it's difficult to start in DevOps is the DevOps team is responsible for production. That is where your customers are running. There's a big responsibility there from a security perspective, from a perspective of understanding the networking layer, understanding the hardware layer, understanding the interactions and the network, not the network, but the interactions and the queuing mechanisms behind the scenes. There's a lot of data. Let me clarify that. There's not a lot of data. There's a lot of knowledge that you have to gain on the job. It does take a long time to onboard a DevOps engineer from one environment to another. But I will say this, let me go back to that. I know I sounded like I was painting a negative picture here, but I'm actually going to paint a positive one. If you are in this environment today and you're learning about AWS and you're getting your certification and you've seen multiple tools used, third-party tools and the inherent tools within AWS, that is a great way to start moving into DevOps and infrastructure engineering. You have to touch it. You have to use it. You have to learn the pitfalls. Unfortunately, you have to be holding a pager and learning when you get paged that there's something went down. That experience is so important in the role. And you can do that as an intern. You can do that at any layer of your career. So I think getting your certifications do help, but also getting that hands-on experience with deploying something, using something. I
gotcha.
think that
Gotcha.
I get it's kind of like a half answer. I hope you understand, because
Yeah.
hiring in this realm is really difficult. I have to
Mhm.
find somebody with unique skills. But you know what? You did point something out I want to clarify. You said, what do you do with the multi-cloud? Well, I do hire for somebody who has expertise in one cloud or another.
Okay.
I don't expect them to know everything in every cloud. And frankly, no one is going to. If they did, they're probably only touching the surface level of each.
Mm,
And I'd rather have somebody deep in one cloud versus deep in it, or a surface level on both. At the same time, they do need to have a surface level on both. I think it's really important that somebody who's joining my team today not only understand AWS, but has seen other cloud environments. And that will make it much easier for them to think outside of the AWS box.
understood. That makes sense. And as far as SREs and DevOps is concerned, where do you see that shift? I've seen some companies only have DevOps as a team, I guess, and some companies only have SREs, and some companies have a mixture of both. How did you determine that a mixture of both would be okay?
Okay, I'm going to be really honest with you. Don't tell anyone this, but I don't believe DevOps is a team.
Okay.
And I have an entire two teams of people here that are called DevOps in my current job. So I think the thing is, we have to look at what they're doing, what you need them to accomplish, and how they work with each other. Right now, my team, my DevOps team, if we want to use that term, because that's their titles, they're really more infrastructure engineering. They manage the cloud environments. They manage the infrastructure layers, the networks layers, the Kubernetes layer, right? They manage the EC2s where we don't have Kubernetes. They are managing even, RDS or any databases that we're running. they're managing that layer of the stack. So to me, even though they're the ones deploying to production and managing that layer of the stack, they often don't know the application layer as well. And that's where SRE comes in my mind. SRE is really an application layer team that understands a little bit more of the underlying architecture from an infrastructure perspective and can tie the two together. And, it's interesting. Every company I work with, every company I've talked to has a different structure. They may call one team infrastructure, another team operations, another team SRE, and they're all doing similar structural things, but they're all titled differently. So when you say DevOps, I will ask many people, what do they do? Are they just your pipeline team? Do they do the development efficiency work, making sure that developers get machines? Or are they all the way up to the production side? My SRE team as well is really, its key importance is to apply observability to our stack. So it's not just having ownership of the application in production, but also being able to observe the application in production. And I'm using observability a little too liberally. I'm not talking about the tools that are out there in the market. I'm talking about really being able to see the application running and know that it's running well. So monitoring, alerting, and all of that fun stuff, that's the responsibility of SRE. While DevOps may help implement that, they also hold a pager. The infrastructure engineers, they're going to hold a pager, meaning they're going to get paged if something goes down. They are often the people who aren't putting that monitoring and alerting in place. They're not thinking at the layer of the customer that's using the SaaS service. Did I answer your question? Yeah. I know I could go off on a tangent.
As far as if we can go down to the weeds just a little bit, as far as the tooling is concerned for multi-cloud, do you feel that it's better to use something like Terraform, which could be used in multiple cloud environments, or do you prefer to use native tooling like CloudFormation or ARM templates for Azure?
Like, what is your say, so my opinion is because of my experience, not because of it's not everyone's experience. So I will clarify that. I have had customers who were dedicated to single cloud, and they would use, CloudFormation and the AWS architecture to deploy all the, the DevOps tools that were related to deploying in AWS. That works best if you decide to stay within one cloud. For multi-cloud environments, I've not seen success with that, and I would not recommend it. And it's because of the fact that you want to abstract away the environment information from the application information. And I feel that a lot of the cloud providers really kind of try to hold you close when it comes to their tooling. You get locked in a bit. And not to say you don't get locked in with Terraform. It is very difficult to walk away from Ansible and Terraform and Jenkins and whatever other tool you have out there. But you have an ability to say, hey, I'm going to change clouds tomorrow. I'm going to move it to here. And if I use a tool that's multi-cloud friendly, it makes it a lot easier. I will say that many of my my team members have asked me, when are you going to do Google? When are you going to host on Google too? And I'm like, well, it's a big shift for my team. No one knows it today, and they're not experts here, so I'm not ready. But when we are ready, I do have the tooling in place to let it happen. And that's a good feeling to have.
Gotcha. So just like future-proofing yourself in case you want to be able to switch between vendors or have multiple vendors at the same time. So while at Second Watch, just taking a break from operations for a second, you also went on reInvent stage, the AWS keynote at the end of the year, and you publicly spoke on stage. What was that like? And any advice for folks who are shy of public speaking is like one of the biggest fears people have?
I did this this advising thing in my office in Tel Aviv recently. They brought me into a room and they shocked me. I didn't know what I was doing. And they shocked me, said, how do you speak in public? And I went, I don't know, because I'm terrified. So I actually do have some tips, though, that I shared with them. And I will say that, as a child and even as a student and in my first few years of work, I was extremely shy and very quiet and an introvert, if you would call it that. I'm a natural introvert, as most technologists are. So this is a learned skill, this outgoing nature that you see here. One of the things that I will say I do that has helped me is I get to know my audience a bit beforehand. I like to mingle in the crowd while they're getting set up. It makes me feel comfortable, like they're family. They're people I know. They're people that know me. I pick out one or two people that I'll recognize. I make them part of
Okay.
my conversation on stage. I feel like when you do that, you make everything a little more human and less scary, and less that you can't make a mistake. People are rooting for you, and they don't want to see you fail. So I have been on stages with, 10 people in the audience, and I've been on stages with thousands of people in the audience. I will say that each time it becomes easier, but I do have that thing that I always do of kind of making that connection with a human in the audience. And that makes people feel that I am connecting with them, but also sets my nerves at ease.
Gotcha. Okay, that's pretty good advice. I think I'll make a few notes and use that next time around. So moving along in the timeline, Second Watch ends, you go to Oscar Health, and there you were a director of technical product management, and within a few months, a senior director, CTO product and program office. How did that come around? And my a specific question to that is that you were tasked with the IPO portion of that company. Did you know that in advance? Is that why they hired you, or they were like, we're gonna have to do this?
Listen, I've
So
never IPO'd a company before that, so I don't know if they made the smart choice of me. But I will say this: when I was being interviewed, I was actually on an interview path, almost taking an opportunity at one of the big companies. I'm not going to mention their name because that would just expose that. But basically, um, a friend called and said, "Stefana, you need to go here. We need you. We need somebody." And I said, "What do you need?" "We'll call it technical product management. That's what we need." I said, "Okay, that sounds fun. What are we doing?" "Well, we're doing infrastructure." "Sounds great. I know that stuff." Um, I met with the CTO then. His name is Isaac Council. And Isaac, he kind of wowed me with his knowledge of the depth of the stack. He's a software engineer at heart, right? And I like working for software engineers. I like people who understand the depth of things. And he said to me, "Well, if you come on here, it's going to be a big shift in the company very soon." So that kind of gave me an inkling that they're doing something, either being acquired or going to IPO. I knew their exit strategy was IPO based on what I could tell on, Googling that company. I knew I would be semi-involved, but I had no idea that I was going to be the person managing all the compliance aspects of the IPO, which I never did before. So about a month into my journey at Oscar, Isaac approached me and he said, "We need somebody to run something, but you're going to be read in." It was I felt like a part of the government organization at the time, but it was, what we were trying to accomplish while we were going through the financial work, right? And that wasn't my responsibility. My responsibility was to make sure our infrastructure and our technical operations overall was under a stricter compliance, because the SEC is now going to audit us. We better be ready. My responsibility was to get them ready. And at the same time of we were doing this, we were growing significantly as a company and scaling to, 1 million members, health insurance members. And at the same time, this was my first environment where I wasn't working at a software company. I was working in industry. So this is a big shift for me throughout. And I learned so much there. I could tell you it was 2.5 years of, what do they call it? Fire hose. Fire hose. At this point, I think I know a lot.
Wow. Okay. So in my experience in the vertical of health and life sciences, change can be slow. So you coming from a startup backgrounds and fast-paced companies recently, how did you find the formula for success here with all the experience that you had in a more regulated environment?
So while Oscar is a very regulated environment, I would call them nothing but fast.
Hmm.
And the reason why I want to point that out is Oscar was formed to not just be an insurance company. They were the insurance company to change outcomes for members. They were focused on better healthcare outcomes. And the only way they could do that, they believe, and they still believe, is through technology.
Hmm.
So their investment in technology and their founder, Mario, was a technologist at heart, right? He's a developer. He could write the code. Matter of fact, he did at points where I said, hey, Mario, step back. That's our job now. Our CEO was a technologist. Matter of fact, I have things that Mario would send me. He would send me, look at this cool tool I got. It's sitting over here on my shelf. But Mario drove a tech first insurance company. And I think, so I don't have a good answer for the slowness, because basically I had 6 months to turn around an operating environment that was secure and good enough for the SEC. And we did it. We did it in that 6 months.
Wow. Okay. And anything else that you remember from that time that helped you succeed here? Any formula for success that you can share?
Well, it's funny. In the past, I've been hesitant to advise leaders on how to
Hmm.
organize their teams.
Hmm.
And I've more like just dealt with the organization bureaucracy, if you would. When I saw things just not right. For example, at the time we had program managers sprinkled throughout the organization, and they were not centrally located, so they couldn't support each other. Um,
Hmm.
this time at Oscar was maybe the first big time that I advised the organization on their org structure. And I said, I've seen better.
Hmm.
Why don't we do this? And I gave them a chart. I actually drew an org chart, and I said, this is what it should look like. And I didn't put names in it. I just put roles. And so you want to know how I got promoted in a few months? That's how I got promoted. So I proposed the org chart, and they said, good, you'll take that. This one will take that. It was actually a very quick move by our then CTO to say, you're right. This is the right direction. Let's get buy-in from others. Let's see if they agree. And I think everyone had sighs of relief, because really they were
Hmm.
all thinking this, but nobody wrote it down. And I finally wrote it down out of frustration, and it was successful. So I think in the end, I learned, don't do it out of frustration, just do it. Do it up front, do it
Hmm.
early. When you notice something that's structurally unsound for the company that you're not going to be successful with because the org is not right, make those changes early. Make those suggestions early. Don't be afraid.
Very cool. So from Oscar Health to OwnBackup, which is your
Yes.
current home, you went from director, senior director, now senior vice president of infrastructure and operations. What is your advice to folks who are looking to make this leap from director to VP?
I think you have to talk a different talk, right? I was a VP in the past, and the titles do matter in your career.
Hmm.
They do. But I always looked at the job first and then said, oh, that title's pretty cool. I'll take it too.
Hmm.
So I want to say that I actually didn't even know the title of this job when I was interviewing for it, but I was very interested, because at Oscar, while I was running program and product management, and I was handling all operations, I wasn't in charge of the infrastructure. And me, based on my history, I have that technical background that I really want to leverage. So when I was interviewing, or rather when the recruiter called me and told me that I'd be running infrastructure, immediately I went, okay, tell me more. I don't even know who this company is. Tell me more about the company. Tell me more about the job. And then they shared that it was global, That's another thing that I wanted back in my life, is to be able to travel globally, to meet my teams. I worked with global teams most of my career, so I wanted to get back to that. And the third thing was when I met with the team, they call it team number one, right? That my peers. I met with my peers and I said, every single one of them were people that I could learn from. This was a no-brainer. I didn't even actually know the title until until I signed the agreement. I knew it was an executive level role. I knew that I would be reporting to the CTO, which was important to me. I will say that my role here is broader because I am more responsible for production than ever, because I'm managing the infrastructure, which is exciting for me. That's my bread and butter. That's the stuff I do well. It is also in a position where I can advise our company on cost effectiveness of our product, because our product is a SaaS product. Our product is consuming SaaS service or infrastructure services every single day. So I feel really empowered in this job to do that type of work.
Interesting. And getting back to the operations just a little bit more, do you foresee Kubernetes to continue on? Some people use it as Kubernetes as the only solution. Some people do a bit more diversification and doing serverless and various cloud providers, a mix of Kubernetes, some hybrid, etc. Where do you see Kubernetes going in the next 5-10 years? It's going to be around for a long time.
I would hope so. I hope it's around for a long time. And I'm going to say that because damn, we're going to have a lot of tech debt if it isn't. I will just say that many companies are still moving to Kubernetes from older technologies. Or, right now we have autoscale groups in part of our infrastructure, and we want to move that to Kubernetes because it's much easier to scale with Kubernetes than it is with building our own autoscale groups, right? Using EC2s. So I would say that, the hope is there that this will continue. I hope some more competitors come into the space, to be honest. I think when you have one, even though it's open source, when you have one, there's not as much innovation as you can see when there's competition. Do you remember OpenStack and all that type of technology? I know it's not there anymore. It's not as big, but I think Kubernetes needs a competitor, and I don't mean it needs to be a sold software solution either. It could be open source. I also think that companies or people are now used to consuming services the way cloud was meant to be consumed, and not based on leasing an EC2 instance, like the one server thing, that it's going to be hard to get away from that model. I would hope that there's an increased scalability, less need for operations teams to manage Kubernetes in the future, some additional security layers. Those are the things I'd like to see.
Gotcha. And as far as the skill sets required for managing Kubernetes, running Kubernetes in production environments, I've seen a lot of folks do certification as well. Where do you see certification versus experience in production environments lie? Do you value both, or one or the other?
I value certification because I know it takes a lot of effort and time to go through the depth of that, but your experience is valued more. I think if you're looking at a job and wanting to advance in your career from DevOps to senior DevOps to so on and so forth, it isn't because you have 30 certifications and keep those maintained. Well, let me clarify. In consulting, it does matter, because guess what? That's one thing that's a good checkbox on the resume, so people know that you have the skill. But I think the proof is in the work. And if you can explain how things are done in your interview or whatnot, those are the people that I resonate with most when I'm hiring. So certifications are nice to have. They're very much helpful to get you through the gate, get you through the door. It's the experiences that you can share. And I will tell you this, if you're interviewing with someone like me or somebody on my team and you don't share a story where everything failed, then you've done yourself a disservice. I think all of us have felt that, and that's a real grounding experience that I feel sharing will help people understand that you're real and you know how to learn from experiences. We're, all of us engineers, and I'm going to include myself in that bucket. Despite all the business talk we've had here, I am an engineer at heart. All of us engineers, we have our war stories when it comes to pager and waking up at 3 a.m. because AWS revoked your keys. That has happened to me. Yes. So, we've all had our war stories, and I think those bring us closer together. And it also proves out that you can learn from things. You can learn from your experience in production.
Yeah, I think some of us have had production outages named after us, probably. So I think that's pretty good experience in my opinion. So speaking of failures, so in a person's career, for example, if you looked at LinkedIn, you see nothing but great things. For example, let's just take you, for example,
Oh,
director,
it looks
senior director,
beautiful.
VP, etc. Looks beautiful, linear inclines, exponential growth. So in your experience, if you can share any battles with adversity you've had and any low points, but more importantly, how did you get through them?
I think that every job I've had challenges, and sometimes it was very difficult to get through them. And looking elsewhere was the best thing for me. I a ways back started building a network of people that I could depend on when things were really tough. And this network became a nonprofit, and it became a community, and it became this thing that I built that I actually thought I was building for myself and ended up building for 800 other people. So, I don't want to promote everything, but basically I built a network of people that I can rely on. And it's funny when I have really tough times at work, these people, and they're at all levels. They are entry level, just starting out. They are people who've been in the industry 25, 30 years. They're from all walks, all different backgrounds, software engineer, product management, project management, and so on. I ask them, hey, what would you do in this situation? I get vulnerable with them. I tell them my pain, and they go, that doesn't sound right. Have you tried this? Have you tried that? That network has really helped excel my career. Without it, years ago, I didn't have any advisors. I only had my boss, and that wasn't the network I needed to excel. So throughout my career, I've had setbacks. I have had a lot of them. There were times where I came back from maternity leave and my job was gone. And that has happened twice. And I've only had 2 children. So no, I'm not having another. That's a joke. I am not having another. And it's not because of not having a job when I came back. But basically, I felt a lot of adversity. There was times where my entire team was laid off because of cost cutting efforts. And I had to shift quickly. I did that through my network. I did that by looking back at my skills and digging deep and writing up my resume and painting a pretty picture so that I can get the next opportunity.
Interesting. I think that probably resonates with a lot of people, me included. So getting back to what we talked about in the beginning about people and AI, where do you see no code, low code, AI, chat GPT, generative AI changing the operation side for next 5 to 10 years, let's just say? Like is
Can we
Stack
get
Overflow and Google, is that gonna go
Yeah,
away
no,
at some
can we
point?
get the AI to fix the bugs in production before they exist? Can we get the AI to do that? Because we haven't gotten there yet, right?
Right.
So, I think the thing that we should be really aware of is that the AI is only as good as what we feed it. And we know this, everyone has been saying this, right? It would be amazing if we could feed errors and information into an AI engine and it would produce some sort of, you know, information that would help us troubleshoot better and help root cause things. When we went from monoliths to microservices, we thought we were doing ourselves a good service, right? Of, oh yeah, let's decouple everything. But now we have all these ridiculous amounts of things to manage, and that has created a complexity level that isn't manageable by humans. So it would be really cool to see technologies that can find decoupled, or rather where the coupling is in our decoupled environment, where the fail points are, where the root cause is. I would love to see technologies on root cause analysis. I know a bunch of vendors are doing that today. So they are already in that space, right? The observability tools out there like Honeycomb, Observe. I just saw them at a conference at DevOps Days. These companies are putting the AI towards the troubleshooting effort. I think from an operations perspective, that's a big win. I also think, going back to Opsani, the things that we were doing back then, where we were trying to scale and auto save and all that stuff, I would love to see that flourish in the market in the next few years. I'm not in the business of building that software right now, but maybe that's my future. Again,
Gotcha.
what comes around goes around, right? So that's where I see AI going really well. I really can't comment on the developer experience because I have kind of removed myself from the space of the developer and more into the ops and the infrastructure side for the past few years. But I could imagine, not for nothing, we've been using AI. What is linting? Linting is error checking, but now they're applying AI to linting. Cool. You're figuring out how we make silly mistakes. I think this is a great way of error checking for humans. And I encourage that type of technology to be built.
Gotcha. Okay. Those are as far as generative AI specifically is concerned, is that something that you're seeing in the operations side, like to generate, for example, Terraform code or CDK code, etc.?
Yeah, so I have not seen this yet where it's been successful. I'll be honest with you. I don't know if do you remember when we were starting with Kubernetes and no one would use it in production? Yeah, that's exactly where I am with that type of technology. I am not ready for production, even though I'm now ready for Kubernetes. And that took about 5-6 years for everyone to be ready. I think it's in its infancy. When you're dealing with production, you have a lot more risk than reward with this AI type of technology, right? And that's why it's a little bit more careful. People will be more careful to put their business on that technology. I would love to be able to experiment in that space, though. I think that a lot of my DevOps engineers would feel a lot better if they didn't have to write that code over and over again, right? Or have to start from scratch, that something helped them build it towards there. I want to point out this, though. In order to make this AI successful, you need smart engineers, right? You do not have the ability to make DevOps something as someone who's never learned anything can click a button. These, I don't see in the next maybe 10, 15, 20 years, maybe. That's when things get a little simpler. It takes a long time for us to learn all the inner workings of how humans work and the nuance there. Maybe it's my a little bit of experience in production lately where I've had outages and no one would have correlated those things and no technology would have figured that out based on what we put in place. It was a human that really figured out that root cause, that knew exactly where to look. And that's something that we might have to take a look at while we're trying to apply AI here.
Understood. So Stefana, outside of your professional obligations, you're also a board member and treasurer of your local soccer club, organizer for DevOps Days in New York City that you just mentioned, and founder and president of Long Island Women in Tech, which you were talking about with the 800 folks that you rely on. Firstly, How do you balance being everything, everywhere, all at once, to quote the movie title?
There is no balance. It's called, this is what did I have? A work-life unbalanced was a hashtag I used years ago when I first had kids. And I went, this is unbalanced. There's no balance. It's a merge. It's a meld. It's just all together. I just keep lots of balls in the air constantly, and hopefully they don't drop. I will say that I have a great network of people that support me, including my husband and my parents and my in-laws that help watch my children while I am off in various cities trying to make my career successful, and then vice versa at work. I have a great team that supports me, that allows me to take off and do the things I need to do to be a real human outside of work. I don't believe in balance. I think it's also my personality. I don't like to be bored, so I just keep adding more projects. I also like to fix things. So when I see something going wrong, I jump in and just start building and start fixing. Hence the reason why I'm on the board of directors of the local soccer club. But I will tell you, maybe that's something I will retire from in the near future as my children grow older and grow out of soccer or go to college.
So do you think there's an innate engineer in you that just needs to start
Fix things.
fixing?
Oh my gosh. I don't know if you know who MacGyver was. Do you know
Oh
MacGyver?
yeah. Oh yeah, I
Okay,
watched
thank
all of
you.
it.
I'm so glad you know that, because when I used that analogy at work like a year ago, people looked at me like they didn't even know who that guy was. So I am a MacGyver. I find ways to fix things with whatever tools were sitting in front of me. You got duct tape and a piece of gum, I will figure it out, I enjoy doing that. I enjoy innovating like that. And I think that is why I take on these volunteer activities, because I see a problem that can be pretty easily solved if I just put a little tech to it, or a little bit of my mind to it, or a little bit of organization to it. And that's why I built those things, and that's why I'm involved in so many things.
Yeah, it's funny you bring MacGyver up. That was my inspiration to get into electrical engineering in the first place back in the 80s and 90s. So
That's
love that
exactly,
person, love
we
that
had the
show.
same inspiration. We had the same inspiration. It's so funny when I use that. I'm glad you said that you have the same, that he was your inspiration. I was enthralled with the fact that I could fix something or create a bomb and get out of I was stuck in somewhere, and I could blow up this wall so I can get out. It was like a video game. I loved it. Uh, to this day, you will notice on my front porch, I MacGyvered a watering system for the plants on my front porch. I will let you know that happened this weekend. So I did spend 6 hours doing that. And yes, I could have hired someone for $50 to put it together, but no, I had to do it myself. And it's working. It's working right now, but nobody touch it, please. Don't touch it.
So, having a daughter myself, I'm very intrigued by Long Island women in tech. And you have shared your personal journey through imposter syndrome publicly with Built in NYC in the past as an article. And you've credited mentorship and attending a Grace Hopper conference in the late 2000s as your motivations and for launching this organization. And you also mentioned your other portion of it. How is Long Island Women in Tech doing this these days? And what is your message to the hundreds of people that are part of it?
Well, I will say I'm not dedicating as much effort as I want to Long Island Women in Tech these days, but they are still out there and growing. More and more people are signing up, joining our webinars, joining our coffee chats. The coffee chats are the best. They're the ones that you're just getting great advice. It's like round robin of advice very quickly, on a specific situation. I think the cool thing about Long Island Women in Tech is there's no barrier to entry. You don't have to be a woman. You don't have to be on Long Island, though the title suggests it. You can be anyone who's looking to get into tech, or if you're in tech looking to grow. And I think everyone who's a part of it really gets in what they give in, which is a great thing to have. I didn't know it would grow this big. I thought it was going to be a group of like 10, 15 people that we would keep together. But after building, we had a podcast at one point. I see more and more people joining and wanting to help run this thing. I actually have an intern this summer who's looking to explore software engineering. And I said, great, let's rewrite the website together. I know that seems like the basics, but hey, we can all learn CSS again.
There you go.
So I think it keeps me in a position of being able to advise people, but also have that network that I always wanted that I couldn't find. And I hope everyone else feels exactly the same way. It's the network that you needed, and that we're all very helpful.
Awesome. And in closing, Stefana, what would you tell your younger self if you had the opportunity to?
Stop being afraid. Take the step forward that you think might work. Don't be afraid to fail. Failure is actually an opportunity. I have proven that. over and over again. And I know we didn't go through every failure that I've had here, but
Mm.
I will say that to my younger self. I wish I wasn't so afraid of my ideas, of trying something new. Yeah.
Awesome. Stefana, thank you so much. Appreciate it a lot. We have the
You're
crowd
welcome.
clapping for you. This is great.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always great to talk on these talks, and love to explore how you go here. Thank you
Thank
for
you so
having
much,
me today.
Stefana. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye bye.